You've asked the questions. We're here with some answers. Some of you have asked, how do you help kids be intrinsically motivated? All right, back to school today, parents. We're going full on school mode here with you because it's important to understand child psychology. Incidentally, I share this same model with kids and teenagers, but I call it parent psychology. That's just your little gee whiz collection. What we're looking at here is control against maturity. Control meaning control over your own life. And it goes from 0 down here at the bottom to 100% up here at the top. So you can have all the control or none of the control or somewhere in between. Down here on this axis we have maturity. Now, maturity is a little more complicated.
It is. A lot of the times people think maturity is directly related to age.
Right.
But it's not always.
It has something to do with age,
Right.
but not everything. Let's start with that because it helps us to understand our model. If you start here at birth, that's this little word that I wrote here. How much control do you have over your own life at birth?
Very little, right?
Very little. Some people say none. Well, you can make a big noise and a big stink, but that's about it. So I'm going to put a dot way down here in this corner of the diagram. Now, as an adult, I'm going to write that small over here too. As an adult, how much control do you have over your own life?
Usually quite a bit.
You know what? When I ask teenagers,
They think their parents have 100% control of their own life, right?
you know the
All the way
small
up here.
print.
Yeah.
But we'll just kind of go with what they say, and we'll put this dot way up here. Okay? So the model is basically starting low and going to high. As you become more and more mature. You get to have...
more and more control.
That's the model. Now, when we introduced maturity, Vicki,
Yeah.
we said that it has something to do with age, but not everything. Because we all know older people who are not very mature. Do you know some of these? And we know younger people who are pretty precocious.
Right.
So we're going to take age out of the equation. That's why I wrote it small. We're just going to take it out of the equation. And instead of age, we're talking...
Stage.
Yeah.
So.
And we've divided it into 3. So let's look at each of these 3 stages real quick. Now, we thought for a long time about what to name them. Do you remember the names for these, Vicki?
Stage
1, stage 2, and stage 3. You should be able to remember those. Most people can.
Yeah.
Now, stage 1...
If you can see that, it's characterized by not a lot of maturity on your part and not a lot of control.
Right. So this part under the line here, this space under the line, is the control. We're talking about children
Of our
right
own
now. So
control, right.
It's self-control. So this is the part of the control your child has.
So you look, your child does have some, and as they get more and more mature, you think about a 2-year-old that can put on their own coat and choose their shoes, right? You know, the same cowboy shoes that they've worn every day, right? So you've got a little bit more control over what's happening.
The part over the line is the part of the control the parents get to take. Okay, or have to take, really, because somebody has to be in control. And if a child is not mature enough to control their own life, somebody has to step in and take up the rest of the control in their life. That's where you come in as a parent. So there's always a shared control. Who takes the control is the question.
Right.
So at stage 1, let's just describe that for a minute. Vicki, what's characteristic of stage 1?
Stage 1 is usually, I want things my way. If I'm happy, it's all good. If I'm not happy, everything is bad. It's very self-centered.
Self-centered, egocentric.
Yeah.
It's demanding. It's manipulative. Stage 1 is where we get fighting and yelling and screaming and tantrums. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Yeah. Stage 1. Now notice that this is not about age.
Right.
We expect a 2-year-old to be in stage 1. They're really good at tantrums. But notice that a 15-year-old could be in stage 1. And if they are, we say that they are immature, right? Now, when we move to stage 2, we stop fighting and start cooperating.
Yeah, that's our favorite word, cooperation.
That's
right
the big one. And that has a lot to do with how we're going to respond as a parent. Stage 2 is also about keeping the peace and negotiating. And there's some respect there for people who have authority or status over them. So if kids move to stage 2, they get to have more control over their life. Parents, you get to back off a little bit at stage 2. Now, stage 3 gets really fun.
That's the great part, because look at this. Look at all the control that your child now is ready and willing and able to take, and you get to kind of sit back and enjoy.
That's because stage 3 is the most mature of these 3 stages, and it's based in values and morals and ethics. This is where kids basically do the right things for the right reasons.
Right. I like to look at these lines right here. This line is cooperation. If you're getting cooperation, you're kind of going over into stage 2.
That's what determines
This is what
it,
determines it. And this line is more of initiative. You're willing to take the initiative.
Where you see what needs to be done and you do it. Now, what does this have to do with intrinsic motivation? When kids are in stage 1, their motivation is external. See, this is the external part. This is the internal part. So when we're talking about intrinsic motivation or internalized motivation, you get more of that as you move through these stages. So to help kids move from external motivation to internal motivation, we want to move them along through these 3 stages.
One of the tricky things about what you just said about the child will have more internal motivation as they go across, and you said as we kind of help them move across. It's tricky because if you are wanting your child to be in stage 2 and they're responding in stage 1 and you get frustrated about it, then suddenly your child is responding to your frustration, your response, your mood. Okay. Remember, over here we got to use some consequences. You know, your child hit somebody, you got to use a physical consequence of maybe being moved out of the way, whatever. You know, we've got to come up with, usually they're physical consequences. And so if you're just yelling and say, why would you do that? How could you, have a big, huge lecture? Well, this kid is not cooperating. The lecture's going to do nobody any good. And so just getting really clear about these and starting to give the consequences that align with the stage your child is in is what's going to help them move.
Vicki, you've pointed out an important aspect of our model here. And in fact, in the Parenting Power Up program, we go into some detail about how to handle each of these 3 stages of moral development. The important factor to remember, like you pointed out, Vicki, consequences are what need to be implemented at stage 1. And you don't get to decide what stage your kids are on. They do. I mean, if you got to decide, you'd just have them on stage 3 all the time.
It's so much easier.
Being all responsible and mature and committed to moral values. Intrinsic motivation, internalized motivation. That's what we're going for. But the important part as a parent is to meet them where they are. You can't insist that they're stage 3. You can meet them at stage 1 and use consequences to help motivate them to go to stage 2. At stage 2, we use consequences plus communication to continue assisting their development towards stage 3. But they're the ones who decide where they're going to be. We just need to correctly discern that as a parent and then approach them in an appropriate way based on their stage of moral development. Vicki, you said something earlier that I think is really important, and that is to, as we detach ourselves from the outcomes and manage our own mood, consequences are more effective than parents' mood in helping kids to become more intrinsically motivated. Because your anger or frustration or yelling and screaming, which we all do, and we've got other videos here to help you with that, but that becomes a very external motivator for your kids. they see that and they respond to that instead of responding to their own internal motivations to do it. And that's why it's so important to detach from those outcomes.
The key probably is to just keep those lines of communication open and have an opportunity, create opportunity to talk about principle with your child.
The principles really are the internal motivators that we want them to attach to eventually. Your kids will get there. These steps will help you to encourage them along that path of development. That was a really quick run through of some things that we can help you more with. Did you know that we've put together Live on Purpose Central just for parents like you? If you'll come and join us over there, we'll give you the tools that you need to become that parent you've been promising yourself you would be. Live on Purpose Central. There's a link in the description. We'll see you there.
Head was down, face locked onto the phone.